The Buddha taught that one must first know suffering, but what exactly is this experience of suffering? I mean, we all know how unpleasant it is when you bump your head or stub your toe, or what it is like to lose a loved one, or when your favorite football team loses a match. But aside from these unpleasant external experiences, is there something else we can call suffering? Well, the Buddhist definition is the experiences of body and mind that are essentially unpleasant. And according to the Buddha, then there are three types of suffering: the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and the all-pervasive suffering of the composite. In terms of the ultimate truth of all phenomena, that is the realization of Dzogchen or Mahamudra, then suffering is nothing other than bliss and emptiness in union. But this is taught to be the nature of all phenomena. And what's more, this is a very high view, and there's no point in kidding ourselves on that we have realized such a high level of view. This is the view of a bodhisattva who has reached the path of insight, and that level is called intensely joyous. And do you know why it's called intensely joyous? And that is because once one has reached this first bodhisattva bhumi, then even if someone were to cut the flesh from your bones, and do so slowly and methodically, then you would only experience bliss and joy, and not suffering. For us, we can't even forbear a pinprick, or being stung by a tiny mosquito, so there is no point in trying to pretend that we have such a high level of realization. Now, when the Buddha taught first no suffering, he probably wasn't talking about this first kind of suffering, the suffering of suffering. And that's because the suffering of suffering is just the coarse experiences of suffering that we all recognize as unpleasant, and what's more, we try to avoid. This type of suffering includes the 8 types of suffering that are common to the human world, and those are the 4 common sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, as well as the suffering of encountering unwanted enemies, the suffering of being separated from one's loved ones, the suffering of not getting all that one desires, and the suffering that is inherent in the appropriated aggregates. So when the Buddha taught first no suffering, was he talking about the second or the third type of suffering? Well, this third type of suffering, the all-pervasive suffering of the composite, is something that only bodhisattvas can perceive. And that is because in order to recognize that all composite phenomena are inherently suffering by nature, we need to have realized the true nature of all phenomena. And by now it should be clear that we haven't realized the true nature of phenomena, because if we had, we would be impervious to pain. So if all creatures recognize the suffering of suffering, and the all-pervasive suffering of the composite is well beyond our reach, then what is this second type of suffering, the suffering of change? Well, to put it simply, the suffering of change means that our temporary experiences of well-being and pleasure can change into experiences of suffering. That although we identify them as pleasant, they change or transform into suffering. And that is because on the basis of clinging to pleasurable experiences, we create the conditions for future and continued suffering in the mundane world. On a very coarse level, we can see that somebody who's addicted to drugs or alcohol, for instance, that although they may very well experience temporary pleasure and happiness, are just creating a whole lot of trouble for themselves by chasing after their addiction. But likewise, attachment to mundane and seemingly harmless enjoyment will eventually contribute to future sorrow. And this is because by these experiences of pleasure, one consumes one's store of positive karma. And once this karma that is the cause of experiencing well-being and happiness is exhausted, then one will have no choice but to experience unhappiness again. And even if one doesn't believe in karma, then it is quite obvious, once you become used to luxury and pleasure, it becomes increasingly difficult to get by in simpler means, or to do without that to which you have become accustomed. So this suffering is definitely something we can work with, because we can all understand just how temporary happiness can turn into future sorrow. Further it is taught, be easily satisfied and of few desires. And this is one of the most profound instructions ever given by the Transcendent Conqueror. But we see this to be a lesser Dharma, and further, we think we can hang on to our mundane attachment, and at the same time make significant spiritual progress. It seems that most Western meditators are just looking for short-term happiness, to be insulated from mundane suffering, or to find pleasure in the pacification of anxiety and thought. But this point about the suffering of change applies equally to mundane experiences as it does to the experiences in spiritual practice. Craving for experiences of bliss, or just wanting to hide from the unpleasant, is to misunderstand the point of this second type of suffering. because by clinging to experience of bliss that arise from our meditation, that will naturally transform into future suffering, by giving rise to aversion to hardships in practice, that itself is a useful tool for purifying past negative karma. We have lost a precious opportunity for developing this easygoing contentment that is so essential for any spiritual practitioner. This was the presentation of the 3 types of suffering as it is taught in the Buddha Dharma, as I received from my own spiritual mentor, from a long lineage of both learned and experienced practitioners on numerous occasions over a 12-year period, while staying in retreat in both Scotland and Nepal, in the hope that it might be of some benefit to you in your practice, and that you and all sentient beings may swiftly achieve awakening and liberation from the mundane world. May auspiciousness fill the universe.